Okay. Thanks everybody for introducing yourselves. It's so good to see so many different people here from, it looks like, a wide range of organizations. And just want to welcome you. We have a pretty packed agenda today. And so you are here at this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how states and communities are actually using their American Rescue Plan dollars for good. And I'm going to hand it to Elizabeth to kick us off. Elizabeth Gaines, Chief Executive Officer of Children's Funding Project.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you to Kylie Wheeler, to Courtney Moore, to, I don't see Esther here on my screen right this second, but Esther Grams, to Sophie Yagi. We have had Chuth Ragnathan. We've had a really excellent team of people at Children's Funding Project that dug in with us prior to last summer and said, we have got to, if we're really going to call ourselves Children's Funding Project, we have got to pay attention to the American Rescue Plan and the stimulus dollars and what that's going to mean at the state and local level where we focus. So Kylie has led this team to do some really amazing work, and we wanted to bring some stories of some of the amazing work that we've been just tracking and following in communities as they've been trying to implement this influx of resources. So as we all know, it goes without saying, 2021, immense challenges on so many different fronts, but this influx of funding for children and their families is pretty unprecedented, right? And so, what is it that child and youth advocates, educators, policymakers at the local level can do to really harness this opportunity with these resources? And we cannot let our foot off the gas on it. And so you'll hear about some of the folks that are really just staying the course. It might not be the shiny penny anymore, but it is certainly more pennies than we've seen in some time for some of these things. So I know that there's a lot of attention being focused on Build Back Better, or there has been in the last number of months. And I think it's really important, of course, to keep our foot on the gas there. But what we just have to figure out as child and youth focused folks in this country is how to walk and chew gum, how to push at the federal level and be thinking about pushing at the state and local levels at the same time. And so that's what we're committed to helping folks do. We formed Children's Funding Project really to help communities, sort of shape their own destiny when it comes to the goals that they have for kids. So this webinar is about helping you figure out ways to use these federal dollars to do that. We just want, hopefully, for folks to get their house in order in 2022 in ways that are really going to help should Build Back Better pass, or some components within it pass. It will help you to use these dollars now to strengthen your systems and your infrastructure for serving children and youth. So we're gonna hop right into it. Kylie, you've got some of the great folks that we've been tracking some of their stuff gathered here. You can see them on the screen. We've got Milwaukee, we've got Anne Arundel County, we've got the state of Connecticut. We could have picked many, many places to highlight. There are many things going on around the country. This is just sort of a quick snapshot, and Kylie's going to give you a really good rundown of a tool that she and the team here have built that will help you find all of the examples that are out there. So we're getting our house in order, and I think, Kylie, let's make sure that as people are introducing themselves, we're sort of tracking where folks are from and what kind of role they play. If we could also, I think we've got a poll question or two that we wanna pull up. Could we do that?
Yeah, we can do that. I will load it in as we go here. And I just wanted to take a minute to thank Pam Brown, Daria Hall, Jonathan Costa, and Tracy Lay, and Sarah Torian with Campaign for Grade Level Reading, as all of these folks have really helped make things really, find success in their communities, but also have been very generous in sharing their experiences with us. And Elizabeth, I'm going to get that poll loaded in here shortly. And as I'm doing that, it would be wonderful. I just want to remind you all, we do have a packed agenda today. So if you could put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, but preferably in the chat. My colleague Courtney is going to be collecting questions and compiling them over the course of the meeting. And then we will take some time to address them at the end of the meeting. So let me see, let's push forward. So the plan for today, we are going to be highlighting an expanded version of the web tool database that we launched back in fall of 2020. And we're going to hear directly from the panelists that we've mentioned, and then we'll do that Q&A. So I just want to kick things off with some context setting. So like Elizabeth said, for the past 2 years, almost, wow, we have been tracking COVID relief funds, really starting with the CARES Act. And you can see kind of the spread of the types of funding we've been tracking as it relates to kids across funding packages. But like Elizabeth said, when ARPA, when the American Rescue Plan was passed, we realized, okay, we need to take it up a notch because there's some really significant pieces in the American Rescue Plan, not only like groundbreaking levels of investment, but also some pretty groundbreaking temporary policy changes as well. So we knew that we really needed to engage more deeply. So, that was what led us to build our database. You can see here, the focus on the American Rescue Plan of the past year, just a wider array of the types of funds we've been tracking, some of which are going to be represented in what our panelists have to share just a little later. And in fact, I'm going to share the tool. And as I do that, Courtney, if you could just put in the chat a link to our American Rescue Plan resources page, that would be awesome. And let's see. Yeah, so going back to the beginning here, for this more comprehensive look at the American Rescue Plan. This is the database that we created, what feels like a long time ago, just clicking backwards. So here you can see just at the state level, starting at the state level, the a lot of money across childcare, both through the supplemental CCDF funding and the new childcare stabilization grants, the fiscal recovery funds, those direct dollars to state and local governments, and then of course our K-12 funding through the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund from ARPA. So if you go here, and I can't see the chat at the moment, but we should have a link and some instructions for how to get to the database. You can pretty easily find your state. So I live in Virginia, so I'm going to go to Virginia. And you can see some Virginia specific information there. Then we're able to dig deeper into the local fiscal recovery fund allocations. And you can search by the type of government that you're looking for information for, or you can find your desired city, county, to learn more about the money that has come to your city or county. So you can do that. You can do the same thing for the district level K-12 dollars. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to find Virginia Beach Public Schools, but I know that we're in there. And Then finally, well, not quite finally, you can see we also included the Higher Education and Emergency Relief Fund grants to post-secondary institutions. So this is super searchable, and we created it because we saw this great need for advocates, for people who care about kids, to have all of this information in one place so that they could more effectively take action using these funds, or encourage their state and local leaders to take action using these funds. And before we head into the more example heavy part of things and show you the new part of the tool, which I'm just absolutely thrilled about, I would recommend, if you just have a little bit of time and not time to dig through all the different funding streams, this page, the comprehensive funding overview, gives you the best bird's eye view of both state and local funding across a wide range, cradle to career funding streams, and funding streams like the fiscal recovery dollars that may not be specifically meant for children and their families, but that can be used flexibly, can and should be used flexibly for children and their families. So, and if you have any questions about how to access this tool or any of our other awesome American Rescue Plan resources, you can feel free to put those in the chat as well, and we'll make sure that you're able to access things. And I just wanted to, again, before we get into the examples, say something about, the question we get, I think the most is, what now? So I have this information, I have an idea of who I need to talk to maybe exert some influence over how these funds are spent. But what role can I actually play? What role can my organization actually play? And we have lots of examples of the different types of roles. But we also have, CFP also has a pretty great suite of other American Rescue Plan resources that Courtney has linked to, including a fact sheet for backbone organizations, which I know that many of you represented here are backbone organizations. And Elizabeth, I'm sorry, I'm not able to navigate the poll piece at this moment. So, but we will try and coordinate that by the end of the meeting. So I highly encourage you to visit that resources page, particularly the Building a Strong Backbone paper is incredibly helpful for organizations that are more on that intermediary level of their communities or their states. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to the expanded part of our web tool. So thanks to the hard work of the American Rescue Plan team here at CFP, so Courtney, Esther, Sophia, and the rest of our team, we have spent probably the last 6 months collecting a wide range of examples of how cities, states, community-based organizations are using American Rescue Plan funds for kids. They are the ones who have answered or are beginning to answer the question, what now? So before I hand it over to our panelists to talk a little bit more about their specific cases and to dig deeper, just to orient you to how you can explore the tool. So again, there are a number of filters here. If you are looking for, let's say, well, so first you can search by state. So you can see if your state or communities within it are doing great things. But for now, we're going to focus on the different types of recipients, the different types of the different funding streams that are represented here, the age groups that these investments are targeting, and then finally, the wide range of focus areas that are represented throughout these investments. So we're going to go with counties and cities who are using their local fiscal recovery dollars. And then we can, let's look for early childhood infants and toddlers, and then maybe children and families more generally. And what should populate here are all of the examples that include one or more of these dimensions. And we can see which ones have a childcare focus, all of these. And then you can see a brief description and the approximate amount of the investment, the age groups overall that the investment targets, et cetera. So, and some source information for where you can actually find the like more information on the overall context. So I'm going to clear these filters and introduce Daria Hall, who is with Milwaukee Succeeds, and she is going to speak a bit about what has been happening in the city of Milwaukee. And real quick, just to give you an example of another way to use the tool, you can search by recipient or by actor who's taking the initiative, and should pull up what Daria is going to talk about today. So I just wanted to give this little quick case example. And Daria, I'm going to stop sharing this and start sharing your slides here in just a moment. So if you want to jump on in, that would be awesome.
All right. Thanks so much, Kylie. I'm Daria Hall, Early Childhood Education Director with Milwaukee Succeeds, which is a local collective impact partnership with the goal of expanding access to quality, affordable ECE for Milwaukee's Black and Brown families. And our partnership is thrilled to have secured an investment of ARPA funds from the city of Milwaukee. So today I'll share what that investment is, why we pursued it, how we pursued it, and what's next. So, and you see on this slide, the city of Milwaukee will be investing $7 million from ARPA into the ECE workforce, and specifically $5 million for stipends to go to ECE professionals to increase their compensation and retention, and $2 million to strengthen and diversify the pipeline into the ECE workforce with a focus on men of color. So if we go to the next slide, talk a little bit about why we advocated for this investment. You know, I don't have to tell anyone here that quality ECE is a powerful two-generation economic development and child development strategy. But even before the pandemic, Milwaukee's Black and Brown families didn't have equitable access to quality, affordable early childhood education, or ECE. And the pandemic has exacerbated these gaps, especially when it comes to staffing in childcare programs. That's a longstanding issue that has really become a full-on crisis. You know, early childhood education businesses can't afford to compensate early educators what they're worth. These are professionals who are doing vital brain building work, but getting paid on average $13 an hour and no benefits. Childcare programs can't raise wages because if to do that, they'd have to increase costs for families. And the average family in Milwaukee is already paying over a third of household income to afford childcare for one infant. So this low pay for early educators, it's a matter of racial and gender equity. Since almost all of Milwaukee's early educators are women and 2/3 are Black or Brown, it also means that 75% of Milwaukee childcare programs are reporting staffing shortages, and that's leading to closed classrooms, shortened hours, longer wait lists, and fewer kids served. So when we had an opportunity to pursue ARPA funds, we knew we had to tackle these workforce issues head on. We can go to the next slide. So what do I mean when I say we? I mean the Milwaukee ECE Coalition, which is convened by Milwaukee Succeeds and includes home and center-based ECE providers, organizations that support early educators and families, mental health experts, philanthropy, and government. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll talk a bit about how we secured this investment. And we did so starting with engagement of civic leaders. As an example, we have both the mayor and the Common Council president on the Milwaukee Succeeds leadership table and have been working with them on the importance of ECE for years. So when the mayor first started talking about initial priorities for ARPA funds, he named ECE. And that brings us to policy development. Through our coalition, we had the right people at the table with the right expertise in place to develop specific proposals for what was needed and what the city of Milwaukee could invest in. Throughout all of that, we centered research and data. We were able to bring forward concrete proposals that included the evidence base we were drawing on, as well as really well-defined cost figures and success measures. And we did a whole lot of coordinated advocacy on behalf of our proposals. We participated in a lot of listening sessions. We worked with the press. We did a lot of targeted outreach to council members. And here, this is a key takeaway. I cannot stress enough how much it was the voices of ECE providers themselves that really made the difference. On the right side of the slide, you see a picture of a group of Latina family care providers who got together one weekend in the computer lab of our local technical college and emailed their alder people. And when this proposal was being debated on the council floor, the legislative sponsors specifically talked about these providers' stories as she was making the case to her colleagues. Also, really importantly, we had a close connection to state policy. And this ended up mattering a whole lot because local policymakers were very reluctant to be the sole investors in anything. Probably the most common question we got from council members was, where's the state on this? And we were able to answer that really concretely. For example, that the state had invested nearly $50 million in federal relief dollars into Milwaukee childcare programs and staff, and that there is an existing statewide educator stipend program that this would be building off of. And then we had trust and processes and ways of working that allowed us to be clear on goals, but flexible where needed to, as just one example of that. The mayor had really been driving the process and decision-making up until the point where he was named to become the ambassador of Luxembourg, at which point our common council came in and really exerted their authority. We had to get a council sponsor. We had to adapt to a new process, but we were able to do that and secure the investment. And we'll go to the final slide. We're really thrilled by support for these programs, and even more so that this reflects the city of Milwaukee's first ever investment of this scale into ECE. So thinking about what's next, we'll be doing program implementation. We expect the funds to start flowing early this year. We're in the weeds of getting contracts into place as we speak. We'll be doing program evaluation. We know we have to be able to speak clearly and credibly about the impact of these funds. So we'll be working with evaluators at the University of Wisconsin to measure program outputs and outcomes, and also to really be able to tell the bigger story about the impact of this investment on Milwaukee's ECE sector. Because ultimately, our goal is to use this as a catalyst for more investment and more equity advancing policy change, both at the city and the state levels. And as just one example, we have a biennial state budget, and work's going to begin on that in earnest later on this year. We want to be able to leverage local investment into more state investment in the sector. So we're excited, we're grateful to our policymaker supporters, and we are very much at the beginning of our implementation process. So I'm going to be listening closely to our next presenters to see what we can learn from their experience. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Daria. That was wonderful. And please, if you have questions for Daria, please put them in the chat. And we will make sure that she sees them going forward. And I am so excited to introduce our next panelist, Pam Brown, who's the Executive Director of Anne Arundel County's Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families. And this is what they call in Maryland a local management board, and what we call a Children's Funding Project, a Children's Cabinet. So they are a powerful coordinating body on behalf of kids in Anne Arundel County. And as I share right now, you can see in our, or as I share in a second, you can see in our list of examples that they have been very busy during COVID. And this is all, these are all the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families. So Pam, I am so happy to have you here. And please take it away. I'm going to bring your slides up in just 1 second. Not yet. Oh, I think I was screen sharing that whole time. Hold on. All right. That sounds good. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. I work for the Partnership for Children, Youth and Families, and we are a backbone agency. So we spend a lot of time trying to coordinate both people and agencies and different funding streams. So obviously, when we knew about ARP and about some of the other funding that was coming down, CARES, the money that was going through the school system, we were trying to figure out how to use it. Next slide, please. Oh, that's excellent. So if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So that we have a community plan that is based in the county that we follow, and it really is a collective impact model. And so we looked at our community plan, we talked to our partners. And the interesting thing about being a local management board is we're also an instrumentality of government. So sometimes we can act as a not-for-profit, sometimes we can act as a technical assistant, and sometimes we can act as government. So we get this opportunity to manage funds in many different ways. Next slide, please. And so the first thing we did, we were very focused on immediate needs, and we used, these were CARES Act, and then turned to ARP funds to support a whole network of food pantries. And we did it through the Anne Arundel Community Development Organization. So we actually applied through an intermediary to our own county government, of which we are a part of. And that relationship continues. And we're up to about 1.5 million now in those funds to do food. Next slide, please. We also act as a grantor. We receive funds and we grant them out. We early in the pandemic knew that we were going to get a lot of unaccompanied immigrant children. We saw an opportunity to leverage ARP funding. We made the application on behalf of our Immigrant Services Organization, and then we directly granted them the money. And that's going to be $800,000 over 3 years, specifically to serve an immigrant population for whom life was made worse by the pandemic. So I think the important thing about these dollars, they've got to be linked to COVID. You can't just go for them. You've got to figure out what the leveraging piece is when you talk about using ARP. Next slide, please. So this is when we realized that we could always go through another door to the public schools. We have lots of partnerships with the public schools. We wanted to work on a program that was related to affordable housing and getting families vouchers. And so we sold that to the school system as the fact that so many more families were becoming homeless because of COVID. So we asked them to run a program called Open Door. They actually gave us $330,000. And I will talk about why that's important, that they actually up the ante, not us, when we get to the end of the slides. Next slide, please. So here was another piece of the funding that we went after. This was ran through CDBG. These were ERAP funds. and they had all the money for eviction prevention. We are really concerned with homeless families and about to be homeless families. So we asked that we could be part of that funding for programs that we already do, making sure that we would always attach it to COVID. And actually, this is an old slide. We're in $1 million plus now. That's ongoing funding. As quickly as we spend it for eviction prevention, CDBG funds are created in a new contract through the county. Next slide, please. So we are now going, because we've become very confident, we run something called Systems of Care for the county. So we are actually writing an application, a new application for ARP funds to get $1 million to strengthen both our partnerships with other agencies, our information and referral, also attaching that to COVID. So we'll see if we actually get that. That's our next ask. And I will say now, don't think of this as a one ask deal. The counties are still working on their first amounts of ARP funding. They're about to get another load in May. So don't think of this as a one and done. I mean, we are going to milk ARP for everything that we can get out of it until it ends. And next slide, please. We're also doing technical assistance to other agencies and encouraging them to apply for ARP funds. So this is we only have one agency in the county really who offers services and supports to our growing Latinx population, and their administrative arm is very, very weak. So we suggested to them that we could help them write a proposal that would actually strengthen their administrative organization ongoing, but we could attach that to COVID. So the county has just accepted what we wrote in their portal for ARP, and now we've got to really design the ask. But I think that that's another way to, don't think of ARP as just using it for direct services. If you can attach extending administrative capacity to ARP, then do it. The only thing is you've got to figure out a way to explain how you're going to sustain it after ARP is over. I think there's ways to do that, and I won't talk about that now. Next slide, please. And here are the issues you're going to contend with. The reporting, annoyingly enough, is actually getting increasingly complex as ARP continues, so the Treasury documents and the Treasury guidelines get both changing and becoming more complex. The other thing, if you're an agency like ours and you've got lots and lots of funding, there's always the issues around supplanting. Be careful that you don't use ARP funding and other funding to fund the same thing, because there will be a day of reckoning for ARP. The federal government always come back with a day of reckoning. And one of these days, all of this stuff is going to be audited. And then obviously the multiple buckets of funding in a county finance system or your own finance system is very difficult. And then the sustainability after 3 years. I actually think that the world will have changed so much in 3 years that we have no way to really talk about sustainability sensibly, because I don't really think we know where we're going to be. But you can always talk about other kinds of funding that you're going to use and the fact that your organization will grow due to the extra pieces that you're doing over time. So there's lots of ways to answer that question. And finally, last slide, please. We were asked 3 questions. I think our biggest success was the immigrant youth funding, particularly because this is a population that is very hard to use federal funding for. And I was actually very surprised that we got that funding. The greatest challenge is definitely the compliance piece. You have got to keep up with the Treasury guidelines as they change, because they are changing and new regs are coming down, and that will catch you out if you don't keep up with it. And I would say the lessons learned, the money is not in just one place. So in a county, you've got to figure out where the portals are. In our county, there was a county portal, there was a school system portal, there was a CDBG area, but there's also state funding that you can go after. So I think figuring out where it all is in your state and locally. And the second thing is, ask for more dollars than you think you can get. We have never had so much money in human services, and it's got to be spent. And counties urgently and states really want to spend this money. So if you've got a sound proposal and good outcomes, and especially if you've got anything that you can point to as evidence-based, then ask for a lot of money, because there's a lot of money out there. I think we're so used as human services agencies to lowballing everything that we naturally lowball. I would say I am not lowballing anymore. I did that at the start of this, and I'm not doing that now. And then obviously, and as the previous speaker said, the importance of all your partners in selling it, in supporting the ask, in getting to the council and everyone who's going to have to make a decision about this. Obviously, your partners are very important. That was a very quick summation of the work of the last year and a half, but I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, for those incredibly actionable strategies. And I just want to echo everything you said, but particularly the point that your cities and counties will be receiving the second half of their local fiscal recovery dollars in May. And if you are not sure how much that is or who is in charge of it, I, again, highly encourage you to use our tool. This is exactly what it's for. You can check out how much your city or county should be receiving in total, and you know, cut that in half. So roughly Virginia Beach, for example, should be receiving about, and don't, this is probably not correct math, but about $43,000, $43 million in May. So they should be accountable for that. And finally, excited to introduce our final panelists, Tracy Lay and Jonathan Costa. They are with EdAdvance out of Litchfield, Connecticut. And they are going to speak about the cool things that they've been up to at the state level in the past, gosh, probably in the past year, it sounds like. So in keeping with how we've done things so far, you can learn a little bit more about what they're going to talk about at length right here. So see, all right, y'all can kick it off.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Lay. I'm the Chief Talent and Development Officer here at EdAdvance. We are a regional education service center and serve the western part of Connecticut. There are 5 other rests that we do work collaboratively with, and are very pleased to work on some of these state projects. I had the good fortune and honor to work with our governor's office and our State Department of Education on the summer enrichment grants that was funded through ARP and the ESSER funding. And we were very successful. We were able to fund 210 programs this past summer. It came together very quickly with not a lot of turnaround time, and had the good fortune to work with the Connecticut After School Network as a main partner, and Michelle Doucette Cunningham, the executive director. Her and I put some endless hours in, but it was worth it, and it was a very successful opportunity for these programs and these families and students. So that's one piece that we did, and we're currently working on the after school grants from the ARP funding and ESSER funding as well. But we're here to talk a little bit more about LEAP, Connecticut LEAP, and I am pleased to introduce my esteemed colleague, Jonathan Costa, our Assistant Executive Director here at EdAdvance, to talk about that.
Thank you, Tracy. So the LEAP program is a little bit different from the other models that have been talked about so far, in that it came directly to the regional centers through our State Department of Education. Essentially, this was holdback money that every state received as part of that program, and the state deemed it most critical to apply it in this particular area. And LEAP stands for Learner Engagement and Attendance Program. One thing Connecticut did pretty successfully during the early stages of the pandemic, especially in that critical phase when everybody went to remote learning, was do a really good job at keeping attendance data. And all of our Connecticut districts were asked to report attendance data to the state every week. So we had a really good handle on who was coming to school, who was logging on, and who was not. And in some of our largest districts, the percentages of kids who were not logging on and in fact were just falling completely off the radar screen was really shocking. And we knew coming into this current school year that if we didn't do something to reach out to those families and those kids directly, we might never get them back. So Charlene Russell Tucker, our Commissioner of Education, directed one of her bureau chiefs, John Frasinelli, and a consultant, Carrie Sullivan Custer, to come to the regional service centers. As Tracy said, in Connecticut, there are 6, to organize LEAP in 15 of the districts that the state believed this chronic attendance data was the most worrisome. And it has been a team effort from the beginning. The regional centers working with the State Department of Ed and our colleagues at Attendance Works and resources from PTHV to design a home visitation program for those 15 districts that would seek to make personal contact with families that we thought were at the greatest risk and build a relationship with them so we could bring them back into the school, into the fold. It was a huge effort on a very short timeline. We started in late April. We got the funding at the end of May, and the whole idea was to get to families during the summer to ensure that as many of those kids could come back to school successfully in the fall. We took a lot of inspiration, as I said, from Attendance Works and PTHV. But for those of you who are familiar with PTHV, that is a universal home visit model. They advocate all families being visited. And because of the short timeline and the heavy lift of getting something that was not in existence at all off the ground on that scale, we decided to focus on the most at-risk students, those in transition years from school to school or grade level from middle to high school, or students that had a decent attendance record, but for whatever reason had fallen off the radar screen. So we did go with a 3-visit model. First visit simply to create a connection, second visit to build trust, and a third visit to start talking about school and what could we do as a LEAP community to help every individual family that we were working with get the resources they needed to get back to school. Our 15 districts represent are mostly our largest districts in Connecticut, spread throughout all 6 of the regional centers. Our success so far has been pretty remarkable given the challenge that we faced. Over 15,000 home visits have been completed by LEAP so far, and we still have another 8 months in this funding cycle to keep the program going. We have loads of stories from our home visitors about personal connections that they made with families that have made a difference, that brought kids back to school, that created new relationships with families that they wouldn't have had otherwise, and really brought insight to staff about the challenges that families face outside of school. We often think of, how could it be that they can't even get their child to get on a bus to get to school? How hard is that? Well, when you go into a home or you go into an apartment or meet somebody at a Starbucks because they don't want you to come to their home and talk to them about the challenges they've had during the pandemic and currently, and why they're not coming to school, you really gain some terrific insights about what the barriers are, what the challenges are, and then you can redirect resources to sort of go after those really critical barriers. So the amount of insight we've gained, the amount of impact that we've had in a very short time is something I think that everyone associated with LEAP here in Connecticut is proud of. It's not perfect. We have, obviously, Omicron has made it harder for our folks to go out. We have a couple of districts that have really struggled because early in the process, they made a decision really based on privacy that they only wanted school staff to do LEAP visits. And as you can imagine, a teacher right now is under so many tremendous pressures. Adding home visiting to their plate is something that is hard to do. So, some districts have not been as successful as others, but we have examples of districts that have embraced this, want to expand it, want to make it a universal home visiting model because they see how powerful those connections are. So staffing has really been our most challenging barrier, as you can imagine. Most of the technical barriers we've been able to overcome, transportation, technology, those kinds of things. It's just human bandwidth at this point that I think is the biggest choke point in trying to grow the program in most of the districts that are participating. And we're doing what we can to push through that. I think our primary lesson learned as a state and as participants is the affirmation that education is a contact sport. We see that the in-person contacts between visitors and families are the most critical components of this. Yes, we do phone calls. Yes, we do Zoom calls. We do all of those things that you have to do when in-person visits are not either possible or practical. But we see the impact of in-person visits on a whole different scale than any electronic communication. I've advocated for the use of technology in schools for 30 years, and I think it's a wonderful tool to extend and to deepen your connection to the community and deepen instruction. And for some kids and some families, it's the better way to go. But for the vast majority of educators, the person-to-person connection in the classroom with families is the way to get the most return on your investment. And so we've tried to make these ARP funds focused on that lever and use it to get the most outcomes. The state has been so impressed by the early results that we're launching a statewide evaluation to see how students who have received LEAP visits, how has that affected their attendance versus their other at-risk peers who have not received LEAP visits. So we're hopeful that beyond this funding period, there'll be enough positive impact data to encourage the state to continue to fund home visits on a long-term basis.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Goodness gracious. Hold on. Technology is not my friend today, so thank you all for your patience. So what's really cool to see, and we're going to move on to Q&A here in just a moment, but it is cool to see the commonalities and the themes between some of your successes and challenges. Daria, the issue of staffing, being a moderate barrier to making these funds actionable. So that is just super compelling on our end. And finally, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Courtney, who has been monitoring the chat. I've been in and out of there kind of seeing broad strokes, but if you wanted to elevate some of the questions that folks have had, and while she's doing that, I am going to launch the poll. So as you are, as we're talking, please feel free to fill this out. So Courtney, go for it. I can't wait to hear what people have asked.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the panelists. There were a lot of questions coming in there that were getting answered. So a lot of those are taken care of. We did have one question about what are some other good resources for helping community organizations understand and navigate federal compliance? So Kylie, one of the resources I shared was CFP's SLURF FAQ. I know that NACO has also been doing a lot of really great work tracking SLURF as well, or state and local fiscal recovery dollars. And do you have any other recommendations for those other buckets of funding?
Yes, I do. And if anybody else does, please feel free to put them in the chat. I would highly recommend going to Results for America's American Rescue Plan Data and Evidence Dashboard. And that might not be the best link, so I'll start with that one. But Results for America has, they've been deep into particularly state and local fiscal recoveries, compliance and reporting requirements. Some really good resources there, in addition to the ones Courtney mentioned.
Awesome. Another question was looking at, in the event that a school district, for whatever reason, has a holdup in funding from a state's failure to authorize, how common is that, / what is the best way to proceed? And they were asking about that for ESSER as well as childcare funding.
And
Yeah.
Kylie, can you take this opportunity to share when we talk about in the tool, the funding that's been set aside, where that funding is and its finalization process?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that question?
The examples. So
Yeah.
when we say $10 million is going to go to Milwaukee City to do XYZ, how do we know for sure in the tool that actually happens?
Yeah, okay, so for right now, and as of today, we don't have this in the main table, but it might be smart to add it in given this question. We have been tracking the status of various investments based on, maybe an organization has submitted a proposal that would be planned. If the money has been, approved, I believe that we would say that is in progress. And then we also have a category for on hold, which is where I believe
Florida asked that question. So
yeah,
yes.
no, I appreciate that. So yeah, we will make that adjustment too, because that is helpful to kind of get a sense of what's actually happening, because it's really hard. There's not a lot of transparency around what happens after the allocations are announced, especially at the state level, and especially with education funds. So, Elizabeth, I'm not sure if we have any great answers on that front of how folks can, learn
Yeah, I mean,
more.
the best we can do from where we sit is alert you to the conversation that's going on around a particular topic, but then it's on the Daria Hall in Milwaukee to follow the money, right? Like Daria has to make sure that this is actually happening. Not to say what you have to do, Daria. I think that's right.
It's all on you, Daria.
Right. But, we do have examples in other instances where, for example, there's been a plan put forward by a state agency and the legislature has not approved that plan for use of funds. And, in our world, that comes down to then advocacy, right? And kind of making the case clearly and saying, hey, look, here are the needs that are going on right now. We need to get these dollars into the field. That something has to break through that logjam, and advocacy can be one of the tools to help do so.
Yeah, thank you, Daria.
Yeah, so Kylie, it looks like those were the big questions that had come through, and a lot of the other ones has been answered so far.
Oh yeah, well, then that's great. Thank you to the panelists for answering questions, and to Courtney and Elizabeth for answering questions throughout. And I'm just doing a quick scan as we run up on time here. I am so thrilled to save this chat conversation. There is so much great insight and so many great questions for us to ponder. And so we will be sending out a recording of this meeting by the end of the week, as well as the slides. And I would love also, I think, to put the chat together into something that everyone can have on hand. I just want to thank again all of our panelists. Thank you to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for connecting us with Jonathan and Tracy. And finally, please share your story with us. We want to continue to add examples to this tool. And I believe Courtney is going to put a link to a form in the, thank you, Courtney, in the chat where you can do that. I see that Rachel in Minneapolis already submitted something because she is amazing. But then in addition to that, we also have our mailing list. We are going to have some pretty great case studies coming out around American Rescue Plan in the next few months. And yeah, I think on our end, that's what we have for you today. So appreciate you being here. Please feel free to reach out to any of us, but to me directly with any additional questions. If you would like to connect with panelists, we would be more than happy to connect you. And yeah, it is amazing to see what's happening, across the country. And thank you for your work.
Hey, Kylie, in true form, I'm just going to ask, do you have 5 minutes to stay on and go through the tool a little bit more slowly for people if they have that as a question?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just noticing there's a couple people who are like, can you show us how to find this thing? Can we just have like a little time with Kylie here for folks?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
okay.
yes. If you want to stay, no pressure.
If you want to stay, no pressure, and also chat your question in.
Yes, yes. Taking a look now.
But to the panelists, I think we can release you if you are needing to get to something.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks so much, Pam, Daria, Tracy, Jonathan.
Okay.
So there was a question.
3:59. Awesome. There was a question.
Well, I'm just looking, there was so much chatting happening, but I saw somebody saying, can you help me figure out how to get to mental health and how to get to, and I just thought it could be useful.
Absolutely.
To pull the tool up and while we have folks here.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. There would be, we'll focus in on the examples portion because that's what's new. And I want to say that, we are open to feedback, like adding the status column and things like that as we continue to iterate and add examples. So first of all, clearing the filters, you can see this little icon here is a good way to like get a clean slate at any given moment. And so let me see. It sounds like if you're looking for examples that are focused on mental health, the best place to go would be to look through our list of focus areas. And I believe that we're housing those under mental and behavioral health. And so that will pull up all of the examples that include that as a focus area. And if you are looking for, let's see if there are any counties that are, yes. And then, many of these have multiple focus areas. So the next place to go would be the description to get a stronger sense of, how much is behavioral health or mental health centered in the work they're doing. So that's one dimension. Let me see what else would be useful.
This is just a random question, but somebody did ask about on the results for America page, but I think if you show them where to find this on our page, so Berkshire County, Massachusetts, show them how to find the allocation that they would have received?
Absolutely. And while I'm finding that,
I don't
so
know if that
first of
person's
all,
still on.
I move this up so you can see the table of contents bar at the bottom. This will help you navigate pages. So if you're looking for information on state and local fiscal recovery allocations, you would go here, and then I'll clear my filters, and filters. So we're looking at Massachusetts. Yeah, so
Yep.
you'll go to state, and then you can either narrow down by county, which I see Berkshire County right here. But if you didn't do that, you could also find your desired county in by searching the recipient name field or just by scrolling. So there are a couple of ways to get to the same results. But I do want to say in the Results for America resource, they are only going to include reports and Courtney, I'm blanking on the word for what counties are submitting county plans for state and local fiscal recovery money if those counties are required to submit them. And I believe that there is a population ceiling for counties that don't have to submit. So, but you should be able to find allocation information for, to our knowledge, every county, every city, every school district, and more. I think we have over 50,000 records here across the American Rescue Plan.
Right, and that's truly across, because you'll find a lot of
Yeah.
databases that are the childcare dollars going to states, or that are the ESSER money, or that are the state and local fiscal recovery direct money. But this is really an aggregator and for children and youth. That's
why we care, or why we are particularly fond of this page, the comprehensive funding overview, because it really does give you a sense of just about everything. And somebody in the chat, Simon, I believe, asked a really good question about the potential to use this data to calculate like a percentage or a proportion of funding spent on, his suggestion was human services, as a tool to, or as a data point to maybe put some pressure on policymakers if that percentage or that proportion is quite low. And we have thought a lot about that, at least but in terms of money for kids. And we know that that is a really broad lens. But you can see here, just based on these funding streams, everything that in our worldview can be used for kids and should be to the degree possible. So we are considering, to Simon's question, identifying some of those proportions to get a sense of how much of the money is actually being spent on kids. The allocation that you see here versus the project investment, which is reflected on this page. So that's kind of an interesting next frontier, I think.
Indeed. Okay, so Kylie, thanks for doing that. I just didn't want people to not know where to go next if they were on the line. So
no, that's great. That's great. And if you have any questions, again, please reach out. We are here to help. I'll stop sharing. All right. Thanks, y'all.
y'all.
Have a great day.
Bye.